Welcome to Lunch with Lincoln. I'm Jeff Timmer. We're going to get started today with a new ad by the Lincoln Project talking about the January 6th committee hearings. Let's roll that.
The MAGA party knows what the 1-6 hearings will reveal. And the louder they get, the more guilty they sound.
What are you talking about? This is stupid.
A criminal conspiracy to overthrow the United States of America on January 6th came from the top. From the man who controls the GOP with an iron grip.
Don't concede when there's theft involved.
Carried out by his aides, his so-called lawyers.
We have to forget about the law.
His allies, and his violent mob pushed by his media partners.
All hell is going to break loose tomorrow.
It's time to focus, to hold the line, and hold them accountable. The 1-6 committee needs to stop playing the polite old Washington game and crack down hard on the traitors who tried to destroy America.
Insurrection!
Because these hearings aren't about politics or party. They're about America's future. They're about a world that's run by you or them.
Well, joining me today is Lincoln Project founder Rick Wilson. Before I bring Rick into, I just wanted to deliver a short monologue. Holy shit. There, end of the monologue. Rick, that's kind of,
it's kind of it, isn't it? You know?
This week has been just freaking amazing. I guess every week is amazing, but what were your thoughts after watching last night? I was skeptical. I think you were skeptical about their ability to, program and pull off the theater necessary to capture America. Did they do it?
That's exactly right, Jeff. And I was, look, I've been as big a skeptic as anybody. I fought with them publicly about I thought their slow pace and they weren't digging deep enough. And I am delighted to be wrong. So far, I'm delighted to be wrong. I'm so glad that they went in there last night with a methodical, and I've said this a lot. In this attention economy, people demand a spectacle. They demand something they can latch onto as a narrative, as a story. And the committee gave people that last night in a way that isn't as scattered and incoherent as a lot of things have been in this process. And I think it was enormously important. I think it was enormously valuable. And I think from the reaction of everyone from Donald Trump on down, it has rattled their shit. They are not happy. This was an opening night that was much more powerful and much more directed than I think they anticipated. And I think they're on their asses today, and they are not happy about it.
Yeah, it definitely seems that way. And I thought they did such a great job of laying out the schedule and teasing out what we're going to see without revealing everything that's going to be shown.
They showed
kind of whet the appetite. Yeah,
they showed just enough ankle last night.
Good way to put it.
To get people to follow along, and then they did, and it's very important. Liz Cheney said it very explicitly, and Sherman Thompson said it very explicitly. They laid out that they're going to explain Trump's 7-point plan for overthrowing the 2020 election and the violence that emerged from it and the conspiracy that was around it. She used an important word last night repeatedly, and that word was illegal. And she's not wrong. And it's something that people have hesitated to say, but what Trump and his people were doing was not legal. It was a criminal conspiracy to overthrow the election, and it led to criminal violence. And so I think we've really, I am weirdly more optimistic, than I have been at any point almost since before 1-6, because it felt as if for a lot of people that there was never going to be any accountability, that the Justice Department was moving too slowly, and we can argue that point later. But I think the committee has done a very markedly necessary and credible job of opening up this debate.
Yeah, it seems like this is all built to end in a crescendo that wraps everything in a nice little box with a bow on it, puts it on Merrick Garland's front step, and says, "Here you go."
Off you
the
go.
DOJ is going to have no choice but to take that box, open it, and deal with the contents.
I think that's right.
Where this is all pointed. Yeah,
I think that's right. I think that there is a really powerful narrative being put together here, and that actually helps in a prosecution where you can tell a grand jury first a story about what happened. that isn't scattershot, that isn't spread across different, individual small acts of criminality. Because until now, what it's been is, asshole X went and kicked down this door. Asshole Y beat this cop. And it didn't feel cohesive. And I think if they do this right, and I think they're doing it right so far, they will present to both the American people and the DOJ a coherent picture, a pyramid, if you will, from the top down of how this thing worked, what happened, what the consequences were. And I think for the first time, and I judge this not by the reaction of the MAGAs, but by the reaction of the guys like Rich Lowry and Jonah Goldberg and all the sort of gentry conservatives, they are really uncomfortable this morning. And they're trying to nitpick the process of the hearing and the small ball shit. And that tells me an awful lot. They recognize that this is going to be resonant and powerful and dangerous. And if you're in the business of excusing Donald Trump, now you have to be in the business of excusing the Camp Auschwitz guys and the Proud Boys and the Lost Boys and the Oath Keepers, whatever the hell they are. All these people that were actively involved. When we learned last night for the first time that the Proud Boy or the Oath Keeper unit that was being sent in was there to hunt Nancy Pelosi. They used that word, hunt. They were trying to find Nancy Pelosi. What do you think that was for? You think they were going to present her with a plaque? I don't think so. These people are these people are what the Republican Party is and has become. And the gentry conservatives who keep saying, "Oh, Glenn Youngkin's the future, Ron DeSantis is the future." No, it's a bunch of guys in camo gear and Confederate flags kicking down the door of the Capitol.
We've been in this business a long time with elections since neither of us had gray hair and I didn't have a bionic hip and all that stuff.
And I had hair.
Yeah. Well, but we've seen, and I find myself becoming, I guess, victim of this or falling into the old trap of, by this time in a campaign, in an election year, the cake is pretty much baked, right? And we kind of know the direction that the fall is going to go. And there's been this narrative that this is going to be fall into the historic pattern where the White House, the party in power in the White House has a bad year, that this is all going to be about inflation and gas prices, which are bad and they are issues that need to be addressed.
It's an issue.
Right, but there's we still have the explosiveness of Roe being overturned. Actually, that's going to happen in all likelihood.
I'm hearing it's days, not weeks.
Right, and then this theater of the January 6th hearings and what could come afterward with the DOJ, in states that are going to be important in 2024, like Michigan, it's easier to list the Republicans who aren't under indictment right now and who haven't been arrested recently than it is to give you a list of the Republicans who are facing criminal charges.
Right.
There's a lot of things that aren't normal, yet we're kind of programmed to look at this normally and talk about this normally, historically, and expect normal historic. And I guess I don't think I'm trying to not let myself become too optimistic, but I don't know that this is going to be a normal year.
There are weird off-year situations every cycle. And yes, it's always harder for the party in power. President's party always loses seats historically, except for 3 elections in the entire history of America. But it is going, I think, and the last time was 2002, which was a very weird political year. But I think there's actually something starting to, if it's not rhyming, it's sounding a little familiar. In 2002, Democrats desperately wanted the election to be about anything except, or Republicans except Democrats except the war. They did not want to talk about the war on terror. They didn't want to talk about 9/11. They wanted to get back to health care and all the other things they wanted to talk about. But the country wouldn't let them. The country decided, no, we're concerned about security in 2002. And I think that we may end up now where there are some reasons for careful hope that the voters are going to say, hey, this is an election about democracy. We don't want to be ruled by these people. We're not with the Camp Auschwitz crowd. We're not with the crazies who want to overturn the election. We're not with the anti-small d Democratic forces that Donald Trump conspired to send to the Capitol. And there's a possibility that, Americans, as always, Americans, we will do the wrong thing over and over and over again until we do the right thing in the biggest possible way. And I think we may get there. And I hope these committee hearings start to help frame out for people that this election is not about inflation or gas prices in the big picture. It's about whether we're going to have a country that resembles the one that we've had for 245 years.
You mentioned the Republican fictional narrative that's out there about Glenn Youngkin being the future. Right. When in Pennsylvania, they nominate Doug Mastriano, who's effectively an Oath Keeper Proud Boy who's the Republican nominee for governor. No question. In Michigan, the leading candidate in the polls was arrested yesterday by the FBI for his role in January 6th.
Right.
In Arizona, you've got Carrie Lake, who is, there's QAnon people who would look at her and go, wow, she's fucking nuts.
Right. The QAnon guys are like, okay, ease up, Carrie.
Yeah. So they're not going to be running with Glenn Youngkins in these important, critical races. They're standard bearers in these. They are going to be running with the people who are going to be exposed in these hearings that were marching with these people that were there. That's who's going to be on the ballot. Those actual people are going to be on the ballot. Doug Mastriano, Ryan Kelly in Michigan. That's what we're looking at. And so to say that this is going to somehow become a race about Gretchen Whitmer and gas prices, that's a little premature.
But it is important for us, as a sort of outside force, and for the Democrats to understand, you're not going to win this race with an 800-page policy plan about free daycare. You are going to have to fight with these people and show the voters, especially our Bannon line voters that you and the team have identified so well for 2022. Those Bannon line voters who are disaffected Republicans, independents, wealthier, more suburban, more affluent voters. Democrats are going to have to peel them off from the Republican Party, and I think they can do it. Like Glenn Youngkin made it very difficult to do because he bought the race. And he was the guy in the sweater vest. Well, Doug Mastriano is not the guy in the sweater vest. And Herschel Walker is not the guy in the sweater vest. Carrie Lake, not the sweater vest. They are crazy. And it's important for the Democrats to use that as a big part of their messaging. We're running against madness. We're running against insane people. We're running against folks who aren't even like close to normal.
Yeah. Let's give the Democrats running across the country a little free advice right now. When it comes to their messaging on gas pricing, I'm seeing way too much explanation about why gas prices are what they are and why we should tolerate it. Look at France. Look what they're paying. We're not paying that much. We should be great.
No.
That is a loser. Stop right now. And what should they be saying? Let's craft a message for him.
Yeah, look, I think it's twofold. The first is Biden needs to show that he is going to. I think Biden should go to the oil and gas leasing companies right now who have a ton of leases they're not using, and there's an incentive for them not to use it. A constrained demand environment has led the oil companies to be in a profit position like they have never imagined in the history of mankind. And he needs to go to them and say, all right, all these leases are now use or lose. You got 30 days. And if you don't use them, you don't get them back. They're going to go back on the market. He needs to also pressure the Saudis and basically tell them, listen, we know you've made a deal with Jared Kushner to try to fuck us, but the consequences of trying to fuck us much longer are going to be severe and they're going to be painful. And finally, I think he has to also continue to pressure Russia on Ukraine. We've got to continue to give Ukraine what it needs in a weird way. That's part of this global demand equation where the Europeans are sucking down a lot more energy outside of their normal Russian uptake, and it's caused a constraint in the global market. There are a lot of things he can do, and honestly, the price fixing aspect of the oil companies in this country, it's not a free market, it's a cartel. And I think that's something that he could crack down on. And I take that from a conservative perspective, not a liberal perspective, because I don't like cartels and price fixing. They are anathema to free market forces. And And look, he could also cut the gas tax tomorrow. He could suspend the gas tax and just say we're going to suspend the gas tax for the next 6 months. Now, a lot of the green folks and the enviros do not want to do that. They think it's horrible and a bad idea and a bad precedent. Too bad. Because you know what? If you cut it, it immediately affects the market. It immediately helps Americans who have to drive to work. And if you do that, it shows a direct executive action that isn't trying to, protect a criminal enterprise like Donald Trump would use executive action, but in fact to help American citizens. It's a really easy play. It's an easy play. And as for the tax money, the tax revenue from it, fuck it, roll. We'll make it up later. I mean, and I tell my Democratic friends this: you should love the idea of cutting the tax thing. First off, it gives you a chance to say, I supported a tax cut. That actually matters to a lot of middle class Americans that don't live their life on what I call the luxury issues. Because if you're a middle class or a working class Democrat, a guy who gets in his truck and drives 30 miles each way to work at a union shop somewhere, you don't really think about climate change or gun control or abortion as a top of mind issue. Your cost of living is a top of mind issue. That's an issue you're focused on day to day. And it would also put the Republicans in a terrible spot of saying, oh, well, we hate that you cut taxes. You can see the gears in their brains going.
Let's talk a little more about the hearing last night. I think we've said we're both pleased with the start.
For sure.
Are there what could they perhaps have done better? Is there any room for improvement from what we saw last night that they could take in by Tuesday, come out with something to up their game?
Look, I think the release of the video content that they did last night was remarkable. It showed a lot of new perspectives on the size of the crowd, the violence of the crowd, the intentionality of the crowd to commit violence. It showed a lot more Confederate flags than we'd seen before. And it was something I hope they continue that precedent of rolling out that video footage. I also think that telling the stories from eyewitnesses who are not in the political space, the documentary filmmaker and Officer Miller, I think those were very compelling, in part because they're not partisan activists. They're not people who come into this with some axe to grind for or against Donald Trump. They're folks who are eyewitnesses to a brutal moment in American history. And so I think you've got to keep personalizing it as they go. And I think they've got to make sure that you don't turn this into a typical congressional hearing where every member is going to take their 5 minutes and jerk themselves off on camera. And I say that bluntly because nothing irritates me more than a congressional hearing where, the 15th member is going to give their 5 minutes of blah, 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 it has left the audience basically paralyzed with boredom by that point. So I think they've got to keep up this great narrative flow and intensity. And I do think that they have to remember, while you don't have people like Matt Gaetz or Gosar or Green or Boebert or any of those other idiots on the committee, I think they have to be ready for those people to try to physically disrupt the committee's actions. They have to be ready for people to try to bust in the room, to try to complain, to try to sue them, all these things. They've got to be prepared for that and not get off of their message. They had a great opening night. They've got to stay on target. They've got to fly down the canyon on this thing. And
the biggest
focused.
Yeah. The biggest surprise to me, and maybe I shouldn't have been surprised about it, and I think this has caused a lot of holy shit with the Republicans, was the videotaped depositions.
Yes.
That they're actually showing those during the hearing. They're not just giving a transcript.
You know what I loved about Liz Cheney? She did the deposition with Jared directly. She called him Jared. She, as somebody who loves to watch Jared Kushner squirm at any occasion, I mean, the guy was like a butterfly pinned to a plate with somebody dissecting him. It was fantastic. But those videos, those now also become elements in Donald Trump's mania about everything that's happening. Because I promise you, he played that Ivanka clip about 15 times last night.
Yeah, can you imagine that's what they teased with last night? Ivanka and Jared and Barr. Everybody who's come before that committee and testified is now going, "Oh, holy shit! He's gonna see what I said. He's gonna see me say it."
Right. Last night we saw Jason Miller, Bill Barr, Jared, Ivanka, Mark Short, and all those people are former, in the Oval Trump world people. I mean, they're folks who were in the inner circle of the inner circle, and well, maybe not so much Mark Short, but all those people were stalwart defenders of Donald Trump, and now he can never trust them again.
Right. Yeah.
Now, I don't think he ever trusted. I don't think he ever trusted Bill Barr. Bill Barr was useful to him, but he wasn't like a sycophant of the kind he likes. Barr did a lot of what he wanted, but it wasn't always like, "Oh, dear Master Trump." But every one of those people that gave a deposition now understands that they're about to get much more famous. And no matter what the Republican caucus does, the fact of the matter is Liz also flagged that Congressman Cheney also flagged that we're going to end up seeing information about members of Congress who are asking Donald Trump to pardon them. Now, do you ask for a pardon if you haven't done something that you know is fucking illegal? No, you do not. They know, they have a consciousness of guilt in asking for those pardons. And I suspect an awful lot of that is about to come to the fore too. And some of them have cooperated for depositions, but most have not. It's going to get very interesting.
I don't recall if Meadows actually sat for any sworn depositions before he stopped cooperating or not, but that would be.
I think he provided documents. I don't think he. I could be wrong on that, Jeff.
Me too. But I'm just trying to think of who's going to be the bombshell, because if they've clearly scripted this and they know exactly how it's going to play out, and they want to finish their closing argument with that boom moment, that exclamation point on that, and I'm just going to be playing guessing games what it's going to be, who it's going to be, and what they said. That's going to be fascinating.
I think there's a real chance that Scavino has cooperated at a level because they declined. Right. Unlike Navarro, they declined to put Scavino in a. And remember, Dan Scavino is the Twitter butler for Trump. He's the guy with the Twitter phone, and I suspect he was an eyewitness to an awful lot of this stuff, and that some of it was very, very ugly, and he's got some information there that may be very damning to Trump. I also suspect, and I talked to somebody who was on the committee at one point, they're going to present something we haven't seen any of yet, which is a lot of the intersecting phone records. Who was calling who was touching base with who on whose burner. And I hope they can do that visually, because I think that leads to a whole second set of questioning for these witnesses. It's going to lead to a whole bunch of other people saying, so why was Mark Meadows talking to a burner phone that was bought at a Walmart in Arlington, Virginia the night before? Who was that, Mark? I think there's a lot of detective work that is going to go on here, and that has gone on in the data and analytics of this, that is going to put the communications network and the conspiracy in a very interesting, new context for a lot of the people that have been watching this thing roll up.
Well, it especially is in that scenario you just mentioned, because they probably have the security cam footage of that Walmart in Arlington.
Oh yeah,
and they know who was there buying it, and they've traced who it's. So when you see Dan Scavino or somebody identifiable, recognizable,
right.
that's
we know
that
Jenny Beth Martin and her daughter from the Tea Party USA group have admitted that they purchased burner phones as part of this operation.
Mm-hmm.
And I suspect we're going to find out that the Proud Boys and the Oath Keepers and Roger Stone and Ali Alexander and all the other, Charlie Kirk and Alex Jones, all these other crazies, I suspect we will get to the nexus of this communication and find out there's going to be one person who was the operational head of this, who was direct report to Trump and then out to the rest of the world. He's smart enough to know not to give the order himself. And whoever that person turns out to be is in a world of shit, to use a technical legal term.
Yeah. And, they might be the one. These hearings could still deliver that kind of John Dean moment. When somebody feels the heat enough, or their conscience, to the extent that they still have one, gets the better of them, and they come for that, that Perry Mason moment in the courtroom here, where this goes in a direction that isn't necessarily scripted, but is hoped that it's driven to.
Right.
That would you can't plan for that. We can just hope that it happens.
I think that's right. I think you can't anticipate it on a certain level, but you can always hope for it. And I do think that a lot of the witnesses in this case will be treated essentially like a drug conspiracy roll up by the DOJ. The Oath Keepers and the Proud Boys, as egregious as they are the street level dealer types. And I want to see how the communication, especially between the people that were providing Trump with this bullshit legal theory, Eastman, Giuliani, Kelly, all these other people that were providing him with this very, very illegal and phony excuse for the election results, where Barr and everybody else was like, it's bullshit, and how they were weaponizing that, and particularly how they were weaponizing it out in the States. We saw that one little piece yesterday that said the phony slates of electors they were trying to assemble were told to act in secret. We're told to prepare themselves in secret for the 6th so that they could be ready to present these alternate slates of electors in the states. That's a conspiracy, Jeff. That's a damn conspiracy. And you tell people to keep something secret when it's secretive. And if you're secretive in something like the national election of a president, chances are you're not on the up and up about a whole lot of other things. And I think it's a very compelling storyline that you roll this up from the bottom. You get the street dealers, and then you get the intermediate guys who are the distributors, and then you get the guy who flies into the country, and then you get the kingpin. And that's simplifying it a little bit, but we've all seen RICO cases roll up before, and I think this is the committee is also showing that if they can come to all these conclusions, the DOJ, which has infinite time and resources, can also come to these conclusions. I do think it's important for the country that either the DOJ or the committee, that as an outgrowth of this process, holds people accountable and puts some fucking people in jail, and not just these idiots who kick down the doors. Look, everybody who beat a cop or vandalized the Capitol, those people should do some time. They should be punished. But it's not going to change the direction of America's course on this rising tide of authoritarianism unless you put somebody like a Mark Meadows or a Steve Bannon or a Roger Stone or an Ali Alexander or someone in the White House, unless you put some of them in jail. They have to go. Somebody's got to go to prison over this. That isn't some local yokel jerk off who showed up, to cosplay in his little LBV and his helmet. It's got to be somebody serious. You got to put some guys who wear suits to work every day in jail, or it's not going to get taken seriously. And honestly, you got to also think about whether you put some members of Congress in jail, because some of them were involved in this.
Yeah, Scott Perry and others.
Yeah, Scott Perry, and frankly, I want to know a lot more about Ted Cruz's role in this, and Mike Lee's role in this,
and Josh Hawley,
and Josh Hawley's role. Yeah, absolutely, Tom Cotton, because these guys were talking to those lawyers about this conspiracy. They were talking to them about what the legal framework was on how they would do this. And say what you will about Ted Cruz and Josh Hawley, and they're two of the most unlikable people in America, but they are both smart guys. They are both attorneys with some mental acuity. And Ted Cruz is a notoriously smart attorney. He's like 300 pounds of shit poured in a sack that became animated somehow, but he's not stupid. These guys understood what they were doing. They were party to these conspiracies. They were involved in this. I want them to be held accountable. I think they need to be punished. Again, guys in suits need to go to jail. And in fact, a guy like Scott definitely should go to jail if he's found to be guilty of these things, because it will send a message to the country that nobody's above the law, that nobody gets to play these games. And right now, and for the entire term of Donald Trump, the message was he was above the law. His allies are above the law. People like Bannon and Stone and Manafort, who were absolutely fucking criminals, who were dead to rights, who were going to jail, Manafort did, were pardoned by Trump on a corrupt basis. And the message was sent to America. Some people are above the law. If the authoritarian leader loves you, you'll get out of jail free. And that's not a country that people should want to live in. That's not a country where the most fundamental aspect of conservatism is adherence to the rule of law. Unless we live in a society with laws and rules and a constitutional framework of laws and rules, we live in anarchy, which is the opposite of what I was told conservatives believed in. Authoritarianism and anarchy are the alternatives to this. Unless we punish some people, unless we get to the truth, unless there's accountability at scale, and not just the low men on the totem pole, I think we're going to have a very difficult time in this country. But I'm happy with where the committee is going. I'm sure we're going to have a lot of exciting news next week on this as it goes forward. And it was great hanging out, man.
Yeah, definitely. I know next week we're going to have a lot of Lincoln Project programming.
Yeah.
Monday, I think we have the game we're in with Trygve Olsen.
That's right.
And Maya May. You and Tara are going to be doing the breakdown at least twice, maybe three times.
I think like three times, actually.
Right. Yeah, talking about the hearings, and we're speaking is going to be on as well. So viewers, please tune in to more programming next week. Why don't we leave today's show with the Liz Cheney's clip from last night that I think was so powerful. That is for those who don't go to prison, those Republicans who are going to be left. I think Liz Cheney said it better than I can right now. So why don't we roll out with that? Thanks for tuning in today, Rick Wilson. Thanks for chatting with me. It's
absolutely,
always
brother. Anytime.
All right. Let's roll the Cheney clip, Felicia.
In our country, we don't swear an oath to an individual or a political party. We take our oath to defend the United States Constitution, and that oath must mean something. Tonight, I say this to my Republican colleagues who are defending the indefensible. There will come a day when Donald Trump is gone, but your dishonor will remain.